Welcome back and thanks for staying with us. Just before we reconvene the summit, I'd like to reintroduce our guests, Dan Perry, Professor Gong Jiang, and Carice Witte. Thank you guys so very much for being with us. We are debating here President Xi Jinping's continued rule, and it does appear that China tends to rub the West the wrong way, especially when it comes to foreign policy and especially when it comes to Taiwan. Will the Chinese status quo remain the same under Xi Jinping? Let's find out.
China will continue to endeavour to achieve peaceful reunification with the greatest sincerity and greatest efforts. To realise this goal, we must combat Taiwanese independent separatist activists with the firmest resolve and take the most forceful steps to repulse interference by external groups. Only by resolutely forestalling in accordance with the law separatist activities can we forge a true foundation for peaceful reunification. Only when China is completely reunified can there be enduring peace across the Taiwan Strait. Any scheme to interfere in China's internal affairs is bound to meet the strong opposition of all of us Chinese, and any move to obstruct China's cause of reunification is bound to be crushed by the wheels of history.
So back to our debate, I'd like to start with another lightning round, 30 seconds to make a point. Should the West celebrate or be concerned about a continued rule under Xi Jinping? Dan Perry, I'd like you to begin.
I think the West is right to be concerned because he's taking China down a path that is potentially confrontational in a variety of ways, most primarily in the case of Taiwan. If China decides to force the issue in Taiwan, that has potential for a conflagration that is global that would make Ukraine look like a polite disagreement. So I think cautious observation is the way to go here.
Carice?
I generally agree with what Mr. Perry has said, and I would add that technology is also a critical area that is of concern. Whoever owns the fourth industrial revolution technologies, cutting-edge technologies, nano, quantum, AI, chip technology, as we saw in the recent restrictions placed by the Biden administration, the world will be paying a coupon to whomever that is. And if it's centralized in a place where there is a more dictatorial or authoritarian perspective, I think that a lot of the world will find that will be very challenging and problematic.
Professor, your take?
Well, I think it's wrong to say that China takes a confrontational role towards the West. Look at who is taking the confrontational attitudes towards China in the first place. Look at the trade war started by President Trump. Look at all these actions coming from the BIS Bureau for the Commerce Department of the United States government, putting Chinese companies on an entity list. Look at the 301 section actions, and all of these things have been initiated unilaterally from Washington. And I think China's government explicitly said that it's not interested in export ideology. It's not interested in seeking a political sphere of influence around the world in competition with the United States. So I think, you asked the question about who is taking a confrontational role.
Absolutely.
It's actually mostly Washington doing that.
I'd like to open up the floor by beginning with Taiwan. It really is quite the controversial issue. China has said that this is a renegade province and sees the ultimate Chinese dream of reunifying the mainland with the island. But what does reunification mean? Are we talking peaceful terms or are we talking a forceful invasion?
I have to say, there is not one group of people on the planet that is going to be wishing to be ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. I strongly doubt that the Chinese people themselves on the mainland wish to be ruled by the Chinese Communist Party. If China mainland were ruled in a different way, by in any nature of a democracy, then it's very likely the people of Taiwan/Formosa would actually want to reunify. Given that we're talking about a one-party dictatorship, it could only be forceful. I frankly doubt China would invade. I think they'll rattle the saber, but if they do, it'll be ugly, and the West will be facing a very major test.
Carice, I see you shaking your head. Are they rattling the saber?
No, that I'm shaking my head about the idea that the Chinese people don't want to be ruled by the Communist Party. I think that is, I really disagree.
When has that been tested?
I personally might not like all the policies of the Israeli government, and the the people of the U.S. don't like their policies there. I'm sure the Chinese people don't like some of the policies, but the party has achieved quite a lot, and I think we have to give credit where credit is due. And the 40 years have seen 800 million people, raised out of poverty, and there have been a lot of improvements in the society. And I also am a firm believer that we should not impose. I don't think democracy is good for everybody. We saw how democracy was so unsuccessful when it was pressed in Egypt. Countries need a whole cultural construct to internalize democracy. Just because the Jews happen to be born to it doesn't mean that everybody is. It was natural for us in Israel, but other countries have to have their own systems that work. And I would say that the challenge of Taiwan is how to manage it. I think strategic ambiguity has done a good job. Deterrence is very important. As Xi Jinping strengthens, he is looking more and more to push the agenda of reunification. But after we saw one China, two systems disappear in Hong Kong, it's very difficult for the Taiwanese to believe that they can continue their way of life, which is what Tsai Ing-wen has said. Nobody can take away our freedom and democracy. So if there is a way for the Taiwanese to remain fully democratic and continue forward, the word reunification, we need to look at how we can be flexible in that definition, because I agree.
But may I just ask,
they don't want to be joined into China.
Why would democracy work in Taiwan, which you seem to concede, and not work in China? And also, I don't doubt that the Chinese Communist Party has achieved economic growth. We all see, although we don't really trust their numbers, but we see people have been brought out of poverty, very much industrialization on what was formerly an agrarian economy. But do we really believe that if they had all the information, as opposed to Xinhua controlling all their information, these people would want to be denied any semblance of freedom? Do we really believe the Chinese people, the Han people, would choose that if they had the various accoutrements of free choice? Frankly, I don't.
Professor?
We're talking about the issue of Taiwan. I think there's a world of a difference between whether people in Taiwan want the mainland rule from Beijing versus maintaining the current status of pretty much the status quo that is very much autonomous, other than enjoying all the benefits practically of it's like a quasi-state, other than officially declaring a sovereign state. There's a world of a difference there. The first scenario is actually not what Beijing is looking for. Beijing is basically saying that we can keep the status quo, other than we cannot accept the scenario of Taiwan moving towards the independence direction. Now, we have to be very clear about what does it mean by Taiwan conducting independence. It's not something about like one day, Taiwan is going to declare as an independent state. It's a process. It's a movement. It's a whole of society, a whole of a government approach towards that direction. And this is something that the mainland government cannot tolerate. And I think the talk all about using of force is really a last resort to prevent Taiwan from further sliding in that path, sliding in that direction. And that's a very dangerous direction.
They won't declare independence because they think they're part of China. I mean, they represent China.
I just want to add about the military option. I think China has definitely changed its view in the last few years since Xi Jinping revamped all of the military, and it changed its view on the value of war, making it much more willing to go to war and ready for war. However, the Ukraine war has shown that if you don't have very targeted battle experience, you are not going to have a good war experience. And I think that has greatly limited the chance of war in the coming years.
Well, I
This
hate to
is
talk about
definitely
war.
going
The
to
war
be
is
an
something
area
we should-
to watch. We are unfortunately running out of time, but absolutely not out of passion. And we hope that as the time gets closer for Xi Jinping to win his third term, we'll have you guys back again to break this all down. Thank you very, very much, Dan Perry, Professor Gong Jiang, and Carice Witte for joining us today on the show. And stay with us. We're out for our last break. And when we get back, we'll have some fascinating stories on our spotlights.